Would a king build a ballroom? The answer is yes. As a matter of fact, a king would do that. Would a king make it so that the court jesters are only kind to the king? No jesters are allowed if they ever hurt the king's feelings? Would a king decide that it is no longer allowed to say the king is bad? No king would do such a thing. He behaves as a petty tyrant in exactly the ways that you would expect like petty tyrants throughout history would behave. Now let's hear what the real Americans are saying about these protests, okay? Prominent Democrats join No King's protests. Republicans blast Hate America rally is the title from Fox and Friends, the weekend team. Now, obviously, the Republicans are not happy that there are millions of people on the streets being like, you suck. Even if you weren't the administration, even if you didn't require a broad popular momentum that puts the wind in your sails of your administration, which obviously this government does require that. But even if you didn't require that, it would probably be if people were getting together to be like, you suck. If people were protesting, they'd be like, you just suck, dude. I don't like anything that you're doing. It probably wouldn't feel too great. It's obviously even worse than that, considering that in a theoretical democracy like the one that we live in, you also need broad popular momentum. And Trump certainly does not have that. And these kinds of demonstrations actually embolden others to realize that Trump does not have that.
But independent Senator Bernie Sanders says the rally is meant to do the opposite, like upholding the values of the Constitution and pushing back against what they say is authoritarianism.
No, Speaker Johnson, the No Kings rally on October 18th is not a Hate America rally. In fact, it's quite the contrary. It's a Love America rally.
It's pretty funny. They are cooking, man. They're really cooking with this whole, these guys hate America.
Meantime, President Trump tells Maria Bartiromo on an exclusive interview on Sunday Morning Futures he's not a king.
Mr. President, do you think that the government shutdown is all about this rally that's happening this weekend, the No Kings rally?
No, I mean, some people say they want to delay it for a king. This is
more
not a
than
king.
that.
You know, they're referring to me as a king. I'm not a king.
Right.
Oh, if he says so, that's fine then. It's fine, man. If he said so, then it's the truth. What do you mean? You know, I guess all of the other times that he has lied and then did the exact opposite of the thing that he was claiming is also not something that we should factor in at all into our assessment of the performance of the president. Like when he said, I don't know what Project 2025 is. I've never heard of it. I don't even know how to read. How could I have read this big document? And then now, you know, 9 months in, 10 months in, he's like, oh, it's awesome. I love Project 2025. Suck my dick. I'm doing Project 2025 right now. Oh, the government is shut down. We're going to bring in the Reaper, Russ Vought, architect of Project 2025. At a certain point, you just got to look at the actions of the administration rather than what the man himself is saying, right? Especially when he has betrayed your confidence over and over again.
The first No Kings rally in June were peaceful, but a handful did erupt into violence, leading to several arrests. Charlie, Rachel, and Griff.
Thank you, Maddie.
Thank you, Maddie.
They were mostly peaceful.
Yeah, right.
I'm Steve Doocy.
Right. Right. Thank God the real patriots are out here. No King's protest organizer argues Trump has an authoritarian agenda. Thank God for the Will Cain show and the rest of Fox News to tell us how real Americans are feeling, okay?
Back day 17 of the government shutdown, and House Speaker Mike Johnson.
By the way, remember, January 6th, just another day. Bunch of tourists that wanted to see the inside of the Capitol. Totally normal, okay? Not an insurrection. And if it was an insurrection, it was actually done by Antifa, even though the people that did the insurrection were prosecuted and put in jail, and they were Antifa, but then the president, in his endless magnanimous nature, the magnanimous nature of our God, Emperor, King, decided that those Antifa had to be released back in the public. But it wasn't an insurrection. Even if it was an insurrection, it was done by patriots that deserve to be free, even though those patriots were actually Antifa, but they still deserve to be free. Now, having said that, No King's protests comprise entirely of Barbara's and Deborah's, okay, that are just like taking to the streets, writing funny little signs on their placards and expressing their anger and resentment towards all of the awful things that this administration is doing. That actually is insurrection. That's peak insurrection. Wine moms are actually Hamas. They are actually un-American. And how dare they criticize the Republican Party? That's the least American thing you can do.
Budget Director Russ Vought saying this afternoon more more cuts are coming due to the shutdown. He says the Democrats have helped drain cash from the Army Corps of Engineers, and he says they now will be pausing over $11 billion in projects in New York, San Francisco, Boston. And
not a king, by the way. This is not petty tyrant behavior, okay? Remember, you have to take Trump for his word. I mean, he's a man of his word. Famously, he said he doesn't know who Russ Vought is. He doesn't know what Project 2025 is. Remember, he said that over and over again at his rallies. Like, I don't even know how to read. Oh, wait, what the that's the guy. Wait a minute. That's the architect of Project 2025, now literally utilizing the government shutdown to stop the funding of infrastructure projects that were previously allocated to, hold on, New York, San Francisco, Boston, and Baltimore, blue cities? That's just a simple coincidence, right? That's got to be a coincidence. That's not king behavior. That's not petty tyrant behavior. No shot, right? Come on.
In Baltimore. And while the money, at least for now, isn't going out, we've got a record amount coming in from President Trump's tariffs. Let's take a look at the numbers over at the wall.
It is pretty funny because, like, while liberals are like no kings, while they're doing the no kings rallies, I suspect the reactionary forces in this country will turn around and be like, no, yes, kings. We want Trump to be a king. Thank you for saying it. Thank you for naming exactly what Trump is so that we can feel a lot more confident, openly expressing our desire for Trump to be the king, the daddy. Fun fact, the Boston Tea Party was a protest against the tariff. Some of the more eclectic protest signs I've seen so far: Bad Bunny for president, no kings, yes, queens, Stephen Miller, a rectal polyp, resist mango, Mussolini, Trump is bananas. These are wine moms, man. These are wine moms. And you don't know the full extent, okay? You don't know what their actual point of view looks like. Just, you know, they're libbed up for sure, but just understand, wait, what? He posted that, by the way, on his True Social. I'm getting a lot of mixed signals here. I'm not going to lie. I'm getting a lot of mixed signals here. This is strange. Look, man, I know it's a cliche. I know it's a goddamn cliche to say, imagine if Obama did this, or imagine if Biden did this. But god damn it, dude. Republicans would assassinate them. Republicans tried to assassinate them regardless. Out of fear that this is what they wanted to do when they did not show anything of the sort. Ay, ay, ay. NYPD statement on the protest. The majority of the No Kings protests have dispersed at this time and all the traffic closures have been lifted. We had more than 100,000 people all across 5 boroughs peacefully exercising their First Amendment right, and the NYPD made 0 protest-related arrests. NYPD is Hamas, by the way. NYPD is Hamas, question mark. By the way, there is something to be said being hailed as a major dub for the Trump administration, because this is literally taxpayers, okay? This is extra taxes that they collected in the form of tariffs. The companies that are tasked with like import and export were the ones who actually paid for it and then added that on to the cost. So technically it still came out of your pockets.
Robert, thank you for being with us here today to try to shed some light on what is driving you to the streets tomorrow. And I have seen some of your videos, I've seen some of your speeches at previous rallies. So I ask you pleasantly, without a full stump speech, why? Why are you protesting President Trump?
Sir, why are you protesting our big, beautiful president when he's so awesome and everyone can see that he's awesome? This is confusing. Why? What are you doing?
Robert,
the local
surely
authorities
you agree.
were clear. If there was any problem, they were ready to handle it. So
surely you
I
agree
don't
that
think the
some of
National
these
Guard is
things we're
deployed to deal
seeing-
with objective problems.
Do you think it's an objective problem when ICE officers are the targets of assassination, for example, in Dallas, Texas?
No one should be assassinated. That goes without.
Yeah, I don't think he's gonna disagree with that. It's just that has nothing to do with this.
You condemn violence, which, by the way, is a bit, I'm not going to call it a
100%.
rarity, but it is a declining proposition on the left. We've seen the polls where many on the left see political violence as a legitimate outlet of pushing back on something they believe, like you, is an authoritarian regime. So it's big that you suggest it's not. appropriate. And you also will not have it tomorrow in your protest, your No King protest. But don't you think that by saying President Trump is an authoritarian, by saying that, you're making people believe that their lives are actually at risk? In fact, by that rhetoric, aren't you legitimizing those, even if they're crazy? You're giving them the legitimacy.
Guys, you can't say Trump is bad. You can't express any sort of discontent towards the administration because what if someone decides to be violent? I guess you can't do anything. I mean, what? This is unironically what these people have been trying to design, okay? Where the issue here is Trump's unpopularity and they can't contend with that. So they're like looking desperately for any way to try and make it illegal to say you are bad, that Trump is bad, especially when he is objectively bad. This is why I've been saying liberals are kind of oblivious to how bad things could potentially get. Like, this is not just about radical elements within the protests or whatever. This is just like straightforwardly about stamping out any sort of dissent.
To turn to violence?
No, unfortunately, we're describing the reality that we're dealing with in our lives. You want to talk about threat to lives, Will? The Medicaid cuts that were forced in the reconciliation bill will cost 50,000 lives a year. That's real violence, and it's not speculative. It's well documented by academic experts. So
if you
lives
think
are
public
being
policy,
lost.
if you
Lives
think
are
public
being lost.
policy and cutting government spending is real violence, you and I have very different definitions of violence. And Robert,
First of all, ICE is violent. Sending the military to Democrat-run cities is violent. Okay? Sicking ICE on your neighbors is violent. But yes, objectively, cutting necessary expenditures for social safety nets that allow people to survive, barely make ends meet, is violent because the outcome of that is that people don't get health care, for example. When you cut 16 million people's access to Medicaid so that your billionaire friends can keep their fat tax cuts, that is going to have an incredibly violent outcome. 16 million people are not going to be able to pay for their health care. And if they can't pay for their health care, what do you think happens? They die. They die. When they need health care and they can't pay for it, they just say, what are you going to do? I guess I'll die. And many people do. As a matter of fact, 50,000 people a year, according to Kaiser family estimates. How is that not objectively violent? And it's really funny because these are the same guys on the right that say taxation is violent. Because when it comes to understanding systematic forms of violence, they literally say the IRS is a violent state enterprise. They literally openly say it. They'll be like, oh, taxes? What happens when you don't pay your taxes? Well, the government comes and arrests you. That's what. Because taxes and taxation is enforced by the state's monopoly of violence at the end of the day. Unless it's tariffs, of course. Then it's the best kind of tax, obviously. No one has ever seen such beautiful taxes in the form of tariffs. That's the most beautiful way. Tariff is the most beautiful word in the English language.
Mike Johnson and a series of other Republican leaders calling us Antifa, saying, which now, according to Stephen Miller, is equivalent to being a domestic terrorist. So we're actually being called domestic terrorists for protesting on the street peacefully.
If words are violence, I wonder which words are more violent. When it's a bunch of people saying this administration is doing up things, or if it's when the administration doing the up things turning around and saying, if you express any discontent with me, you're a terrorist and we have to violently apprehend you. If words are violence across the board, I wonder which of these words are more violent. It just makes no sense. It's so stupid.
Stephen Miller's called you, Robert Weissman, Antifa.
The millions and millions of people.
Like, words are violence. And that's why when the administration says the military must be deployed against domestic enemies that we have declared domestic threats, domestic terrorists, and that they need to go full force, which I don't know what that means, but I have some ideas on what that could mean. Full force.